Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Beyond the Indus. I'm your host, Tushar Shetty. So, Bangladesh has had a tumultuous year and a half. After the ouster of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in the August of 2024, the country has been led by an interim government under Chief Advisor Mohammad Yunus that had one clear overarching mandate to stabilize the country and prepare it for its democratic transition. And that project is easier said than done. And for the past year, many observers, both within and outside the country, have had one question on their mind. When is Bangladesh going to the polls? Well, folks, it's finally here. On the 12th of February, the stage is set for more than 127 million eligible voters to choose from the almost 2,000 competing candidates for 300 seats in the Jatiya সংসদ, Bangladesh's parliament, as well as on a constitutional referendum that will formalize the arrangements that were sought in the July Charter. But this election is just the start of a difficult transition to democracy, and whoever ends up forming the government has a difficult task ahead of them. So, who are the contesting alliances, and what issues are they campaigning on? How will the next government deal with the surge of political violence that we've seen throughout the campaign without resorting to the brutal tactics that ousted their predecessor? And after the election, what lies ahead in store for the future of democracy in Amar Shonar Bangladesh? To answer all these questions and many more, we have back with us our two incredible Bangladesh analysts, Dr. Smruti Pattanaik and Dr. Mubashar Hasan. Dr. Smruti Pattanaik is a research fellow at the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. She holds a PhD in South Asian Studies from the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and specializes in politics in South Asia and India's policy towards its neighbors. Dr. Mubashar Hasan is an adjunct researcher at the Humanitarian and Development Research Initiative, HADRI, at Western Sydney University, Australia, and holds a PhD in politics from Griffith University. So, Mubashar and Smruti, it's fantastic to have you both back on. Thanks again for joining the podcast.
Thank you for inviting Tushar.
So, maybe, Smruti, starting with you, the election campaign is finally properly on since we last spoke. Tariq Rahman has made his come back to Bangladesh to succeed his late mother as leader of the BNP. And on the other side, the opposition alliance has also coalesced around the Jamaat, including some interesting members. For me, most surprisingly, the NCP, the ostensibly secular party that came out of the student revolution in July of 24. So I wonder if we could just start off with talking about the different parties and alliances. What are the election manifestos and the key issues that are being campaigned on? And what does support for the parties, each party and each alliance, look like on the ground, understanding that it's difficult to get hard estimates at a time like this?
I think both the political parties have been preparing for the election for quite some time. If you remember, after the announcement that the election may take place before Eid, I think both the political parties, in a sense, conglomeration of two political kind of coalition, were preparing for the election. I thought that Jamaat was much more prepared compared to the BNP, though many people think that Jamaat is not prepared. Some analysts feel that it was not prepared, but as far as I know, they have been thinking of whom to put candidate in which constituency for a very long time. Of course, it is an interesting coalition, as you said. NCP till the last minute was negotiating both with the BNP as well as with the Jamaat Islami, and finally they had to go with Jamaat Islami. It appears that the Jamaat provided them the maximum number of seats which they were bargaining with. It is a very unlikely coalition, I feel, even though the students also worked with Chhatra Shibir, which is Jamaat student organization, during the uprising. But also at the same time, from the beginning, they have been trying to say when this particular party was formed, they tried to keep some of the Jamaat student leaders. They did not want to include them. In spite of that, I found it a little surprising them coming as Jamaat, because I thought, I had a lot of hope personally for the NCP, thinking that, it is a political party which is really, neither BNP nor Awami League. It is really, really a new politics. But having said that, perhaps they were not very much sure about the electoral, what kind of result they may have. So they didn't wanted to take any chance. Therefore, they wanted to align with either of them. BNP, as you have said, is one of the oldest party, has got Tariq Rahman, who just got back from London. And I think it infused a kind of I would say life to the PNP. I wouldn't say that he didn't had a life before, but definitely his return really put the political party much ahead, because there was a little bit of uncertainty who is going to head. Those questions were raised at a popular level that under whose leadership the BNP go for the election in terms of the campaigning. We all know that who the leadership in the BNP was. So therefore, I think that is significant. But having said that, I had looked, I had glanced through both the manifestos of the two political party. The Jamaat is banking much more on the 2024 youth revolution because it speaks of change. It speaks of kind of bringing in new politics, no corruption, providing scholarship, blah, blah, blah. The typical kind of election manifesto. Beyond that, that peg is 2024. That is what I felt, the anti-discriminatory movement that took place. The BNP's is much broader. It speaks of a family card. It speaks of a Kisan card. It also speaks of, both the political parties speaks of sovereignty, mutual respect and that kind of thing. None of them they speak on any country. But like, for example, I found it very interesting that Tariq Rahman, in his manifesto, one of the things is that he wants the Bangladesh to be hub of, aviation kind of thing, connecting Southeast Asia and Southeast Asia. So that also gives you a kind of clue about the kind of relationship the BNP may have with India, because if you're going to connect the two, the next door neighbor is India. So I have a lot of hope. But similarly, if Jamaat comes to power, I believe that at least they will have a pragmatic policies, because you take a lot of thing into consideration when you are in power. When you are not in power, you may say different kind of statement you give. I also found it very interesting that Awami League has, the Jamaat Islami has fielded two Hindu candidates. And recently I saw one of the persons saying it very openly that, the Hindus will be much more safe under a Jamaat Islami regime than any other regime. Though they don't have any women candidate, Jamaat Islami has not fielded any women candidate. I don't know about whether NCP has fielded anything. I've not looked into it, but from Jamaat there is no women candidate. I think BNP is basically, in the field level, the Jamaat wants to portray itself as a party which is very clean. People don't have experience of Jamaat Islami, which actually adheres to the ideals of Islamism and does not allow corruption, provides a kind of security to everybody who lives there. But BNP, very openly speaks about a much more pluralistic kind of thing. But of course, they also speak of going back to the 1977 constitution, which was there, in 1977. That has been BNP's stand. So I don't think it is something new. They have said that when they were negotiating this constitutional reform proposal. I think crucial point in this election is not who is going to win. The prediction is, I think the BNP is going to win. I always say winning is not important. Who is going to rule is important. In a sense, as a researcher, I think it is the Jamaat which may dominate, even if the BNP gets the majority. Appears to me, it's just election has not happened. It appears to me. I'll explain that a little later. But I also think that the crucial is the referendum. The crucial is how they negotiate the constitutional changes and iron out the kind of differences they had on several issues, especially pertaining to the election of the upper chamber. So therefore, I feel there is a lot of hope. There has to be change, and I think of course, the Awami League vote bank, as you said, just the last point I want to make, is something. Yes, there is a lot of local interest and all. I somehow feel that people who are living in Bangladesh, even if they are Awami League sympathizer, they will negotiate between the two political parties. I think either they will pressurize or willingly they will vote, because after all, they are living in the country. Every day they have to navigate the local level of politics, and how to get their work done at the local level. So even navigating that kind of politics, you can't just be a mute bystander in the election and say that, oh, my political party whom I always loved or whatever is not participating in the election, therefore I think Bangladeshi voters are very prudent. They will go out and vote for either of them. But it looks to me that perhaps the BNP, some of the sympathizers probably will vote for the BNP, but for the Awami League voters, the Jamaat has said that whoever is where, will fight, will get you out of the, jail. And in some places, in fact, they have taken out procession demanding freeing of certain Awami League leaders who are jailed. So they, at least at the local level, they projected themselves that the real people who are very sincere about people without any kind of allegation or any kind of accusation who have been jailed in on false charges.
I'll just add few things. One is that the manifestos of the Jamaat and BNP both are focused on rebuilding Bangladesh, but there are few core distinctions that needs to be highlighted for the audience. So, the manifesto that is provided by Jamaat is also quite ideologically and morally, framed in that manner. There is, even though they talk about anti-corruption, they talk about human rights, but we know that there will be limit to it because it's an Islamist party. And then, we didn't see what is going to happen in terms of people who may not believe in religion, and also the persistent comment of the Jamaat Amir about women being subordinate to men, and then undermining women rights in many ways. That in one of his interviews to Al Jazeera, he said, it is Allah's will that women will not be leader. Women are not supposed to be leader. These are highly problematic. Even though, as Shruti mentioned, that they have couple of non-Muslim included in their in their candidacy, but I understand that BJP also has Muslim supporters, but that doesn't make them democratically pluralist. There's always be a objection that there is a limit to their pluralism. So I think we should be very cautious about the limit of this rhetorical construction that Jamaat is providing, because at the day's end, it is a party where Muslim men are dominating. They don't consider women or minorities or even people with no faith as equal as a democratic state should be. On the other hand, BNP's manifesto focuses on delivering products. I spent a month in Bangladesh recently. I also had a meeting with Tarek Rahman. So I asked him that what is going to be your position if people criticize you, if you become prime minister? What is going to be your position about free speech in Bangladesh? And what are you going to do about prevalent culture of torture in Bangladeshi law enforcement agencies? So, and I wrote an article about it in Diplomat recently, and I mentioned that conversation in that article. And he told me that he was also a victim of torture, and he will try his best to curb the restriction on free speech and so forth. But I think what is missing from both parties' manifesto is a strong commitment to human rights, strong commitment to reform the intelligence agencies of Bangladesh, who played a significant role in human rights violation during Sheikh Hasina's regime. Even the July Charter or the referendum does not cite this issue. One of the core reason Sheikh Hasina became unpopular, and locally people call Awami League fascist, which is a local perception and the way local narrative, is that she used intelligence agencies like DGFI, which is a military intelligence, national security intelligence, NSI, detective branch, all police, rapid action battalion, to violate human dignity, even kill them like a mafia thug. And we are talking about, the whole rhetoric that the UNIS government came into power against the backdrop of people's protest against this culture of human rights violation, right? Um, they talk about July Chada. Um, they talk about restructuring the state, the parliament, and those sort of things. But none of them have committed that they're going to reform these intelligence agencies. They're going to make them accountable to the parliament. There is nothing. So I'm not that enthusiastic in the sense that, yes, it is encouraging that people are going to vote. That is incredible. Uh, and there will be no pressure from the state. They are encouraging voters. So, one or two generation of Bangladesh didn't know what is a free and fair election. So that is encouraging. But I'm also got a skeptic that even when a democratically elected government will come into the power, how they are going to navigate these structural challenges, which played a significant role in undermining human rights democracy in Bangladesh. So that is a question that we would perhaps ponder in one of our next episodes.
Yeah, Mubashar, that's an interesting point that you made. And in fact, it leads pretty well to my second question about the question of mob violence and institutional failure, because we saw after the assassination of student leader Osman Hadi on the 18th of December and the following unrest, let's say, across the country, including the attacks on two of Bangladesh's most prominent newspapers, the Daily Star and Potamalo, as well as the horrific lynching of Deepu Chandra Das, which happened around the same time. So I guess the broader question I have is about whether or not the incoming government can stabilize the law and order situation without resorting to the tactics and using the agencies that their predecessor had. And whether this unrest we're seeing is unique to this election, has been seen in the past, or is it something that we have to worry about things getting worse for the next government?
That's a good question. The problem about the mob of attacking two of the most prominent newspaper offices in Bangladesh. We haven't seen such level of violence before against journalists. And there were 28 terrorist staff who were at the office when mob set fire. So, I have friends who were there, and one of them said she couldn't breathe. There's so much smokes coming in. The the problem is that the Yunus government, or the elements of within the Yunus government, previously had mobilized mob to justify ban on Awami League. There was a mob who demanded ban on Awami League, and some of the people who led this mob were part of NCP. There are a lot of people who were associated with the political parties, especially Jamaat, were in those mob. And then it is just banned it, even though even though 2 months before he gave interviews to foreign news media that is not going to ban Awami League. So, and it's not unique tactics. I consider Shahbag, the movement, was also a bit of a mob tactic, which was heavily supported by Awami League to justify the killing or the capital punishment of Jamaat, and there's none of those verdicts were accepted as a fair, as a evidence or fair trial by any human rights organization in the world. So it is not unique. About the lynching of this religious minority, Dikuchanda, that is very unfortunate, inhuman. But it is also not unique. We have read an article in the Foreign Policy magazine where we have shown that since 2013, there were mob attacks against the religious minority, especially Hindus and even Buddhists. Villages are burned. Um, and it is a problem, I would argue, that is the problem of Bangladeshi majoritarian societal mindset, where many governments fail to take a strong action and do not say that it is not okay. But eventually they also arrested people. So I would not say that none of any of these are unique apart from this mob attack in the newspapers. And the way it was framed is also quite unique. There are social media influencers from France and from America who mobilized this mob and said that the reason Hadi was killed because these newspapers were creating ground for his killing, and they portrayed this newspaper as anti-Indian newspaper, pro-Indian newspaper, and also pro-Awami League newspaper, which is if anyone read Prathamondo and they registered in the last months of Sheikh Hasina, they would have seen that how critical reporting they have done against Sheikh Hasina. Largely, though, I would give Dr. Yunus around 60 out of 100 in terms of maintaining stability. I've been to Bangladesh twice after he has taken over the power. There was no state violence to that extent that Sheikh Hasina was using. And also Sheikh Hasina used mob. That's for your viewers, the Chhatra League was acting as a civilian militia in alliance with the police and security agencies to killing protesters and those sort of things. It is a political culture issue, and that it goes back to the heart of the problem is the absence of democracy and also weak rule of law in the country. Thank you.
Right. And Smruti, I wonder if you could add to this, because the question of the same institutions that were perhaps responsible for a lot of the repression that happened during Hasina's time, many of these institutions, if not necessarily the same members in them, will be responsible for keeping the law and order intact, for the next government. And then the question is, with the tactics and the methods of the previous government, is there potential for abuse by the next government? How do you think about this contrast?
I will take from where Mubashir had made in the last point about the reforms of critical institutions which are responsible for maintaining law and order and at least accountability of those institutions. And I think reforms to those critical institutions are not put in place. It appears to me that perhaps vested interests are not interested, because these are the instrument which is always used by the state. Hasina was there for more than 16 years. So, in our recent memories that became very, very prominent. But I can take it back to the Operation Clean Art. Again, the government of that day, the BNP was provided, it provided immunity to those who were acting against, who were involved in certain human rights violations. So this indemnity thing is very much present throughout Bangladesh politics. The government using certain instrument of the state and then providing them immunity so that at least they can stabilize the government or give the result the government wants. Having said that, I would also say that I agree with what Mubashir was saying about what has happened in the in the mob violence and on. But we also need to look at the capacity of the state in terms of, we have seen that after the government fell, the previous government fell, the police people, many of the people working in the police had fled because, as Mosir was also pointing out, how the Chhatra League and the police had acted in unison when the uprising was happening. So the police fled, and the army is still in the magisterial duty, and that is one of the reason why army kept on insisting, please have elections so that they get out of this kind of duties, magisterial duty, which is army is not meant to do that magisterial duty. So I would say that two reforms which will be very crucial. One is the police, and second is the intelligence agencies. And this false case, in fact, in some cases, the interim regime has done very well, but in certain issues, I feel that the interim regime actually mirrors the previous outgoing regime in terms of allowing false cases to be filed. I think 127 or something custodial death has happened. I think it was New Year's report or something. I'm forgetting now what was the source of this particular report. And I think 2 days back, one of the former minister, he died in custody. He was 80 plus. We also saw Saryar Kabir being, produced before the court. So some of the people against whom this accusation has been made, not all of them actually have committed that crime. So there is no fair investigation. The fact is that it is a kind of political vendetta which is going on. I think one of the report I saw, which David Bergman had highlighted in one of his posts, a particular crime that was committed in Chittagong, where Fazle Karim is shown arrested, though he was not. This kind of more violence did not take place in his constituency. So there is a kind of political vendetta. So if you are still arresting like the previous government, keeping your vendetta in mind, who is speaking against you, who is criticizing against you, I think what actually I found it very really incredible is the thing is that if you are criticizing the government, immediately you get very labeled, like it was happening in the previous government. You are an army sympathizer, you are this, that. So, not many people are speaking out because nobody wants to be labeled, as. So the moment you get labeled, I sometimes feel that you in your narrative are trying to fight against that label. You're not adding anything further to take any kind of narrative forward. So I think this imprisoning civil society actors, by labeling them, they get imprisoned in that label. So then when I look at how people are speaking, I feel that is something which is really affecting a kind of narrative or kind of dialogue that is necessary, because you see many people are quiet. Not many people are speaking up. Everybody is waiting because, as I said, this interim regime, I felt, doesn't really have a kind of character. Like when I say character means, well, where it is in power. There is a responsibility. You know who it is. In the interim regime, it becomes very difficult, to know who is from which party, what affiliation. So therefore, the best is that don't speak, keep quiet. So I see shades of the previous regime, in this particular regime. So I really do not know how much is going to change.
Moving on to another issue that's shadowed this, not just this campaign, perhaps, but the interim government itself is, the long shadow of the Awami League and, Sheikh Hasina, because, Sheikh Hasina was sentenced to death in absentia by a tribunal in Bangladesh on the 17th of November, 2025. And the reactions have been mixed, as you can imagine. Many have condemned the trial as not due process, unfair, and not meeting to certain requirements of legal procedure. First of all, what has happened to the Awami League supporters and the support in terms of the power brokers, in terms of the institutional influence that Hasina has built up or during her term in Bangladesh after the verdict? Is there a future for the Awami League in any form, perhaps under Hasina's son? In Bangladesh in the future. And, to you, Mubashar, specifically, we say due process, human rights, legal stuff, all these were denied to you, when the Sina regime kidnapped you and tortured you, essentially. So I wonder how you feel about this and what is your view on not just the verdict, but also the longer future of the Awami League in Bangladesh?
I was in the bedroom of Sheikh Hasina recently, and they're making a museum out of her residence. And I was reflecting, in 2017, she put me in an illegal secret jail. Nobody knew whether I would be alive or not. And just now in 2025 December, I'm standing where she used to sleep, and she fled. That's quite, I was still reflecting on that. But having said that, I also know that there are a lot of Awami Leaguers who are questioning those Awami Leaguers who fled the country with money. Um, one of the Awami League minister was found to own 600 house in UK. Not one, not two, 600. And he was not even a significant minister. So there is a frustration within the Awami League rank and files between those who are left behind the country and those who fled the country. And you could see social media videos where those Awami Leaguers, many of those who are left behind the country, are using bad words towards those who left the country and said, who will carry out the cost of the cases of the people who are behind jail, and so those sort of things. Having said that, I do believe that, there should be political space for Awami League, but not for those who committed crimes against humanity. Because there are hundreds and thousands of sympathizers, Awami League sympathizers who are in the country, and there should be political space for them. But we do not want those who were involved in extrajudicial killing and forced disappearances, murder of their students, and they should face the punishment. And I do think, I'm not sure how much is the future for Sheikh Hasina family is there in Bangladesh in next 7 to 8 or even 10 years. It seems to be, and Smruti would perhaps focus more on that, is that they're more relevant in India than in Bangladesh, if you know what I mean. It is quite interesting because I do talk with people who fled Bangladesh, who were part of Awami League as well. And there is this sense that even a reform version of Awami League could come out, but this family has used this party as a source of income generation and as a source of controlling the wealth and influence in Bangladesh. And none of them are permanent resident in Bangladesh. Um, you know, her sister is a British citizen. Her son is now an American citizen, and they enjoyed this privilege. So I think that in the coming days, what we are going to see is more faction within the Awami League, and it will be a natural process. But whether Awami League has a future as a political party, I think there are, but it will take time because the trauma that Sheikh Hasina family had created among the young generation, because this memory is quite fresh, and it will be very difficult for them to come back as business as usual, as normal, or just punishment. In terms of the quality of the justice, I would not comment too much on it because I'm not a legal expert, but there is an irony of it. This tribunal was set by Sheikh Hasina, and uh, she used this tribunal to hang Jamaat Islami top leadership and also one or two BNP leadership, and it's an irony of her fate that she herself was convicted in it. So there is a lesson in it. The lesson is that people should focus on just rule of law rather than using justice as a political vendetta, because you never know when the page will turn against you.
If I can add here what Mubashar was saying, I agree with, that memory is very fresh. Probably people are not looking towards the return of Awami League. In any case, the election is happening. So for next 5 years, you are not going to see the return of the Awami League. Number two is that the party has been, of course, monopolized by a particular family, but that is not something which is very much true only about Awami League, but we also have other political parties, not just in Bangladesh, but look around everywhere in South Asia. So therefore, that is part. Let us take that as part of the political parties in South Asia. But having said that, I think the party needs to reinvent itself. It cannot continue without really having any kind of a kind of roadmap. They don't have a roadmap. It doesn't look like they have a roadmap. In a sense, I don't see them fighting against the ban legally. At least I have seen, I always make this argument. Jamaat, at least when it was deregistered as a political party in Bangladesh, they took it up in the court. Even at that point of time, the court was also seen as partial or, favoring the ruling regime. So if Jamaat Islami can take their deregistration case to the court, why can't the Awami League take? In a sense, either they're taking it as a fait accompli or they're just not looking at the reality that there is a ban on the political party. I agree that the vote bank, there is a particular vote bank for the major two political parties, the BNP and the Awami League. There has always been 30 plus kind of thing, but there are also quite a few people who are sympathizer but not committed. They vote in terms of the party performance and that kind of thing. So in a sense, to some extent, I do feel that it is preventing a party, though I remember the BNP and Jamaat had given statement in 2024 that let people decide whether Awami League should be there or should not be there and let them fight the election. There was no objection. As Mubashar was saying, the ban came in a particular context. Probably, the NCP thought that if Awami League is not banned, probably they will not be able to, they don't have a vote bank. But other three political party, they have certain vote banks. We can debate on what, where the swing can take place, but they didn't have a vote bank, So therefore, I would say that perhaps depends on whether Awami League is is going to reinvent itself under a new leadership. And I agree with Mubashir. The only problem I had with Awami League not being allowed to participate in the election, they should have been allowed. But anybody who has an accusation in the court of law, having used the state, corruption or behind, the repression, they should not have been allowed. It doesn't matter. Give them a chance. I know, these are the political party which is really controlled by a single individual. Even if you would have given a chance, if Hasina would not have been allowed to participate in the election, I don't think the party would have participated. So in that way, it would have been much easier. We would not have been debating right or wrong of the ban, whether whether it helps or not. But I think it is, in Bangladesh politics, the past Awami League has a relevance. Like the Muslim League in 1947, the League is dead and gone. Whether Awami League will be in that position to be dead and gone, I really do not know. In the context of India, we still have the Congress Party, as the main opposition. It is one party which was part of the freedom struggle, but not dead and gone. But while as the Muslim League and now the Awami League appears to me like, people really want to forget them.
So the future of the Awami League obviously in question, but very much we'll have to see after the election, what the political equilibrium is. We're just going to have a quick break, and after that, we're going to get back into the election, the prediction and outlooks, and also a couple of thoughts on what the primary challenges are going to be for the next government coming into power. So stay tuned. And we're back with Dr. Smruti Pattanaik and Dr. Mubashar Hasan on Bangladesh's make or break election. as we were discussing, Smruti and Mubashar before, I'd like your outlooks for the election and who you might think would come to power, although it's a parliamentary system, so what proportion of seats do you think each alliance might win? But even more importantly, I do wonder about what happens after the election. Because as important is what will the parties, who are not in government choose to do? Will they act as the loyal opposition? Would they resort to the politics of street violence and mob justice? So, starting with Smruti and then Mubashar, I would like your outlooks for the election and what happens after.
I think to me it appears that the BNP will get the majority of the seat. That is given, not me. Many people are predicting the same. Because this is a political party people are very aware of, played a very significant role during the liberation war, its leader, founder. And it is a party that, appear to be prepared, though I compare it, if I compare it with Jamaat Islami, I find Jamaat Islami was, as I was saying, much more prepared, much more disciplined. So it is a kind of bilateral contest between the Jamaat-led alliance and the BNP-led alliance. Though it appears that the BNP has much more promise as a political party compared to the Jamaat Islami. The Jamaat Islami's projection is that it is new, it will be different, it was never in the power. I really do not know whether that actually will gel with the majority of the women voters. I'm not speaking of the Jamaat cadre, but in Bangladesh, the nearly 50% of the voters are women voters. And I've seen the reaction after the Al Jazeera interview. So it's not a question of who is going to win. What is the kind of seat? Actually, that will determine the kind of negotiation that will take place over the July Sanand, which is the constitutional reform, which is being proposed. Only four has been proposed. Four pillar of the constitutional reform has been proposed. To me, the controversial one is how the election is going to take place to the upper house, whether it will be based on the seat somebody has received in the parliament, in the Jatiya সংসদ, or whether it will be a kind of model which is basically the proportional representation. Of course, Jamaat prefers a proportional representation. Perhaps it thinks that BNP will get the majority seat, because I'm just giving, very quickly, I give an example of Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, the person who became president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, he had won on the proportional representation basis. He was, his party only won one seat in this thing based on the proportion of the vote his party got in that particular election. So therefore, in a sense, even if your entire vote does not go, is not wasted. So you are getting the upper of seat based on the kind of vote that you have polled. So therefore, Jamaat is insisting on that much more. So the negotiation will take place on that. So if by chance the BNP gets the 2/3 majority, or it gets the 2/3 majority, or it gets a simple majority, I think in many of the cases, it will be in a strong position to negotiate. For the simple reason that when the negotiation takes place, it has numerical majority to have a say. Because on many places, BNP has its own disagreement. At least on those points, the BNP will able to, keep its position on a particular amendment intact. So that the Jamaat will not have much say if it is in the opposition or has a less seat. So therefore, it will become politically very significant.
It's difficult to project exactly what's going to happen, but I want to underpin for your viewers and listeners that this election is about the trajectory Bangladesh is going to undertake, whether it is going to be lead and lean towards a religiously conservative Islamist pathway, or whether it is going to be heading towards a pluralist nationalist pathway. That this election will decide, because we have two parties who are situated themselves within an opposite political and value spectrum. So at one end we have Jamaat, and it will establish a government that will not see women as equal citizen of the minorities as equal, and whatever rhetoric and whatever soft diplomacy they use, but it's just not going to happen. And we have seen so many examples through their rhetoric in recent days. And women played an important role in Bangladesh's development, in Bangladesh's economic growth, and even the July uprising. There are so many women and girls took the streets against police, against military, and without their active participation, I do not think July uprising or revolution, whatever term we use, would have been successful. So I think I would like to see a political party that is more liberal, more plural, come into power in Bangladesh. And most likely BNP would form the government. Um, but even though we need to understand the significance of Jamaats in Bangladesh, even if it ends up getting 70 to 80 seats or even 100 seats, it's a big event for the global Islamist movement. It's not just Bangladesh. It's not just significant for Bangladesh. If you look around the Islamist politics all around the world, it's their dream. It's kind of their dream situation if that happens. And Bangladesh would be, in that way, Bangladesh would be considered as a model for global Islamist parties. So that is going to be a new, interesting development in Bangladesh. And if you talk with a lot of I talk with a lot of Jamaat supporters, leaders, and activists, and they're very confident that they're going to win. But I don't think they will. They're very good in narrative politics in Bangladesh. But we have seen even in the Washington Post, but I don't know you have seen it, that they have made a lot of positive impact even in Washington D.C. So to summarize my points, I would think that BNP will win, but even if Jamaat loses, I think that it put Bangladesh in an interesting trajectory from the perspective of global Islamist movement, because they may act as an inspiration for Islamist parties elsewhere, like in Pakistan, Indonesia, Malaysia, Morocco, Egypt, and so forth.
And I wonder what happens to these student leaders, whether or not they join the NCP or other parties, because they have been able to exert a surprising amount of pressure on the interim administration. And I wonder if after this election, whether they'll be able to successfully transition to the rigors of, electoral democracy, or whether, having tasted power coming from proclamations and from street action, whether they might carry forward these tactics to a potential BNP or perhaps Jamaat government in the future.
The student leaders were a very significant actor during the July uprising, but the kind of ideal they projected at that point of time of having the kind of change, bringing in change to the system, in fact generated a kind of hope. But I think that political alliance with Jamaat actually has taken this the complete steam out of the student movement, because you are not establishing another kind of ideology, you are not providing a kind of alternative politics which you promise. You are part of the existing, what has been existing. I think since they are much more dependent on Jamaat in this particular alliance, Jamaat will have a very dominant role in this alliance. I really do not know how far the NCP can get out of that and have its own political trajectory, which is very, very different. So in that sense, I think that they have to a very large extent have lost their relevance. So therefore, if you look at the tactics which they followed at that point of time, it is not just these student leaders, but definitely the Chhatra Shibir was also a very significant part of the uprising. including, as I said, some of them had infiltrated to the Chhatra League for a very long time and have been there part of them. And also the student leaders of the BNP. But having said that, I think Chhatra Shibir is much more organized. We have seen how they performed in all the last student union elections, but that actually I don't think will reflect in the national politics. So therefore, there were peasants, there were everybody, anybody who was aggrieved with the kind of politics that was followed in the past, during the Hasina regime. So I would not really, I don't think, they are giving that feeling that they are the agent of change. They are, with their alliance with Jamaat makes me feel that, the part of the old politics, old gang, if one can say. So they're not going to bring anything new to the table because I think they're contesting in 30 seats, if I'm not mistaken, out of 300. If 30 seats they are contesting, there are other political parties which are part of the Jamaat Islami, and the AB party, our Bangladesh party. So I really do not know where do they stand in this kind of, the both ideological divide as well as questions on major social issues like the women's participation, the role of women in politics, where they stand. Can they just say that, that is not our politics, that is not how we define it, is Jamaat politics? But if you're aligning with them, so you are, it is coming with certain kind of things, a certain kind of ideology. So you accepted that kind of ideology. So you are not showing any kind of new path. It's not going to be a new politics. It is the old politics. So how can you, with the old politics, really usher in a new Bangladesh?
And I think lastly, we want to touch upon some of the challenges the incoming government might face. There's one particular issue I have in my mind. Right now, we're seeing a very sad, T20 World Cup. As our viewers might know, cricket is virtually a religion in South Asia. And we're witnessing a very sad one because Bangladesh is not participating. And I think that reflects the broader issue of Bangladesh-India relations and the negativity that has crept in there. And I wonder, maybe, sorry, Mubashar and then Smruti, one of the issues we're seeing on the ground that it's developed over the past year and a half is this substantial anti-India sentiment, which has outlasted Hasina's ouster and now seems to be creeping into the politics of Bangladesh, where I think even though both, parties' manifestos seem reasonable towards foreign policy without mentioning anyone in particular, I wonder if they would find it difficult to come to arrangements with India when there can be accusations of being pro-India, thrown at them during their government's reign. I wonder how this India sentiment is going to affect India-Bangladesh relations, being one of the most important relations for both countries in the subcontinent.
So I'll start with the example of Joy Shankar visiting Bangladesh on the occasion of Khaleda Zia passing away, and then holding a meeting with Tariq Rahman, chairman of Bangladesh Nationalist Party, and we thought that was a very good gesture from India and a way to reset and reset the tension towards dial down the tension a bit. But when he went back, then there was a Bangladeshi cricketer who was banned from T20, and that kind of triggered the anti-India sentiment to a new height or new level. So I wonder, and Shruti could perhaps focus more on that or could shed more wisdom in it, that whether there is a synergy between the political parties and the government of India about Bangladesh. Because obviously, like in Bangladesh, the way India is a politically, culturally relevant issue, it is also the same in India. It has that anti-Bangladesh, anti-Yunus sentiment. And whether there is a synergy between the government and the political parties are there, perhaps Shruti could highlight more. But I also want to underpin that, talking about anti-Indianism openly does not really mean that there is a widespread Indian sentiment. Obviously, there are a lot of criticism about India, and many, I would say, for the reason that people have seen or think for the right reason. For example, supporting Sheikh Hasina in one-sided election years after years, and then giving refugee to Sheikh Hasina who had to flee the country against a mass protest doesn't look good to many Bangladeshis. But at the same time, India is important for labor for Bangladesh, the biggest labor. I mean, people go there for medical checkup. People go there for tourism. There are years of people-to-people contact were there. I would probably suggest or also think that maybe the way Indian public diplomacy had worked in Bangladesh could diversify it. I would say that, the critics of Sheikh Hasina was not able to go to India during the time. Shoidul Alam, the photographer, he was denied visa. I was denied visa to India, even though, I had nothing to do with it. So India has positioned itself as an extension of Sheikh Hasina's government in Bangladesh. So that needed to be perhaps revisited if there is an interest. But I would say that it is for the mutual benefit that India-Bangladesh relationship works. And I think both Jamaat and also BNP are quite accommodative because they do understand the ground reality. It is the biggest neighbor. It is a military might. And also we share waters. We share a lot of things together. There is no point of animosity. But I just don't understand why India is backing Sheikh Hasina so much. What is the future goal? What is it that they're going to get out of this? And on that note, I'll leave it to Shruti to explain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mubashar. I would say that, coming to your question, Tushar, I feel that there is a lot of expectation from India as far as democracy in Bangladesh is concerned. Because I always thought that, both China and Russia also equally have been very supportive of the Hasina government. But also at the same time, I think since India is a democracy, if there is deterioration of democracy in the neighborhood, there is always a kind of expectation that India must help. India must at least come to the rescue. India understands democracy. I know many people, many of the time, have asked me that you guys are, under democracy. Why are we deprived, kind of thing? So there is an expectation. So you have an expectation at a level. It becomes very, very difficult for India to adhere to that expectation, which I feel is genuine, which is very natural also. But also at the same time, the regime in power, you have to navigate between the expectation of the regime in power, which wants to sustain in power, and also you have your own interest. The country has its own interest. And we also have seen that how Hasina had engaged both China and India and balanced each other. So, at certain time, even if you don't like, especially the 2018 election, where it was thought that the BNP will get at least some seat, India completely felt a real letdown, if I can say that. But having said that, I would say that India is looking forward a kind of change. It has not insisted on that too. Though we keep on speaking about inclusive election, but when I look at the statement, that particular statement is not something only true of Bangladesh. The same kind of statement also has been given in the context of Nepal and all, because from the stability point of view, India feels that if there is an inclusive election, then the conflict dimension of any kind of political transition is actually taken care of. But also at the same time, there is a reality of geography both for India and Bangladesh. If you look at the map, we don't face only a kind of military kind of security threat. There are plethora of non-military threats that the two country faces, where the security expectation really converge. You really cannot distinguish between them and say that this is Bangladesh's problem, this is India's problem. It is, in fact, in many issues, it is the problem of both the countries. Like, for example, Yaba tablet, going here and there. There is these militant groups operating on both sides of the border, and there is radicalism. I think it is threat to both the countries. So therefore, security no more is a very territorial centric. But I think India has been. There are certain leverages that is there between the two countries. For example, India provides Bangladesh the largest number of visa. I think the largest in the world. Of course, after Hasina's downfall, it has not. India has been restricting the tourist visa. Only the student visa and the medical visas are going. This is the cheapest place for people to come for medical treatment, unlike many of the rich people in Bangladesh who can afford to go and get treatment in Bangkok and Singapore. But most of the poor people, people who really don't have that kind of money, because like you are not spending on flight, you just take a bus from Dhaka, reach Kolkata. It used to be 1,000 taka. I really do not know how much it is now. So it's the cheaper mode of transport. You can come, you can speak about your, if you're suffering for something in your mother tongue, you can explain what exactly is happening, which, you can't do in other countries. On Sheikh Hasina's, India providing Sheikh Hasina, I think from the Indian perspective, it looks like if somebody has been friendly towards you, somebody, has supported, like, for example, the transit, which is which corridors which are being put in place, the connectivity corridors which are being put in place. It for the past 15 to 17 years during Hasina's time, the insurgency which one saw in the northeast was completely tamed and all. So how do you treat a person who had in fact not done anything to hamper your your interest, or even hamper your security interest? I think for India the security interest is much more compared to any other interest. So you just don't, when it was a very little time which was given when India was there was this information which came from Dhaka, from the military there, that she wants to fly to India. So there was no time where to negotiate, you think. So obviously, if you don't give asylum to Sheikh Hasina when nobody is giving, so what signal you are sending to those regimes in South Asia who have been friendly towards you, who have not affected their security interests, that you do, you protect my security interest, tomorrow the crunch comes, we are just going to sacrifice you. So there is this dilemma. So, of course, I understand, what Mubashar is saying. There is a lot of anger. Therefore, this anti-Indianism is there. See, rhetorical anti-Indianism is okay. Election time anti-Indianism is okay. But I think that is not the reality of the geography. So, the two countries, especially, I know that the people who will come to power know the reality of geography. And within that, both bilateralism, and India is doing with Bangladesh a lot of like quadrilateral, the BBIA and the BIM states. So there are different forum. Like, for example, Bangladesh is now the member of Colombo Security Conclave, which is actually dominated by India, and it is India which facilitated Bangladesh to be a member. So there are various forums the two countries are working. So I would not look at this election rhetoric defining what the relationship will be between India and Bangladesh. We have covered quite a bit. I'm sure we will go forward. At least I'm positive about it.
Fantastic. And I might just add that, you talked about the Jamaat and the BNP, but I was going through the NCP manifesto. And the last 2 points they had was they're going to take a firm stance against India at the highest diplomatic and international levels. And more ominously, a promise to establish an unmanned aerial vehicle brigade and surface-to-air missile batteries. So a little worrying over there at the NCP side. But nonetheless, I think that sensibility will prevail, or at least in the parties that have a reasonable chance of forming the government. So best of luck to everyone involved. And Smruti and Mubashar, thanks again for joining us.